This sleepover horror story actually happened to my dad back in the 70s, in his home country of Fiji. So there's no way for me to provide any newspaper articles or similar evidence. However, I assure you that this is a true story. I have verified it with my mom and uncles, and it's all legitimate. My dad lived in a farming area where each house and farm was a few miles apart from each other. My dad was about 14 years old. He was invited to a sleepover at his uncle's house. He liked his uncle, so he went over for the night. His uncle had a wife and 3 kids, aged 3, 4, and a 6-month-old baby. They had a great time eating, chatting, and playing with the kids, and then it was bedtime. My dad went to sleep, but suddenly awakened by a loud noise. Then he heard screaming and what sounded like gunshots. He ran to his uncle's room and witnessed his uncle shooting his wife and kids. My dad freaked out and ran away. He tried to exit through one door, but couldn't open it because it was jammed. The old farmhouse needed a lot of repairs. His only option was to run back to the other side and use the other door, which meant crossing his uncle's room again. He had no choice and slowly walked back, unable to resist peeking into the room. He saw his uncle standing there with a gun, and as my dad stared at him, his uncle turned around, looked at him and said, "You're lucky I let you live," before putting the gun to his head. In a panic, my dad started running, and he heard one more gunshot as he fled. My dad ran out of the house and kept running down the dirt road all the way back to his own house. Luckily, his dad was still awake with some friends, drinking and playing cards. My dad collapsed as he made it to the front porch and told everyone what had happened. They called the police, who went to investigate and found everyone dead. A while later, my dad learned that his uncle had several mental health issues and was supposed to be taking medication, which he wasn't. That was the reason he went insane that night. As you can imagine, my dad was traumatized for a long time afterward and had nightmares about his uncle. Again, I assure you that this is a true story. I can see the pain in my dad's eyes whenever he recounts it. And although I wish I had a news article or some sort of documentation, it took place in the 70s in Fiji. So, there's no way for me to find any such evidence. My scary sleepover story happened when I was 10 years old, just starting 5th grade. I made a new friend at school, Sarah. My parents allowed me to go for a sleepover at her house. They had met her mom once. My mom and dad were pretty laid back because I was their youngest child, and my sisters were 9 and 13 years older than me. So, my mom dropped me off, said hello to Sarah's mom, and left. Sarah and I had started playing karaoke when her mom decided she was going to leave. She said goodbye to us, gave us kisses on the cheek, and I remember thinking she smelled like black licorice. Sarah and I were left to do whatever we wanted for the next 5 hours. Sarah's older sister came home around 1 a.m. and told us that we should go to bed because we were falling asleep on the couch. So we went to Sarah's room and lay in her bed. Later that night, I can't be sure what time because it was pitch dark, Sarah's mom came home. I woke up to a pounding sound on Sarah's bedroom door. I started yelling in fear when I felt a hand over my mouth. It was Sarah, telling me to be quiet and pretend to be asleep. But at that moment, it was too late. Her mom had kicked the door open, stormed over to the bed, and grabbed Sarah's face. She began screaming at Sarah because we accidentally left the TV on. I was trying to hide under the covers, but she saw me. She began slamming her fists on the bed around me and screamed, "You think you're better than me?" over and over. I was sobbing, and all I could think about was going home. I was so scared, and I begged Sarah's mom to let me call my parents because I felt sick. Her mom grabbed my chin, looked me in the eyes and said, "I know what you're doing, little girl, and you aren't going anywhere until I say you can." She stormed out of the room, slamming the half-broken bedroom door behind her. Sarah said nothing. Neither did I. Needless to say, I did not sleep that night. In the morning, when I went to call my mom, Sarah's mom was on the phone. She wouldn't let me use it, even though I asked multiple times. Finally, she was going to take a shower, and I overheard her pass the phone off to Sarah's sister and say, "Don't let that little brat use this phone. If you do, I won't buy you cigarettes anymore." I was a sheltered kid at the time, but when I overheard that, I knew I had to get out of there. I approached Sarah's sister, and she basically threw the phone at me. She was ready to give it to me before I even asked for it. With a look of fear in her eyes, she said, "My mom is calling her guy, so you need to call home now." And so I did. She saved my life, and I still believe that to this day. I shudder at the thought of what her guy might have meant. Was it someone who was going to harm me? I don't want to know. My mom picked me up, and I acted like nothing was wrong. 2 days later, it was Parents' Day at school. Sarah was in my class, which meant her mom was there. Her mom approached me and asked me why I never wanted to come over anymore, and accused me of being a mean girl. She talked to me in a way that seemed harmless, so it wasn't obvious to my mom or my teacher. I kept my mouth shut and didn't say a word. Well, until 2 weeks later. My older sister was babysitting me while our parents were at the movies, and I broke down and told her what happened because I couldn't stop thinking about it. She comforted me and told my parents. We hugged each other and cried. A couple of weeks later, Sarah stopped coming to school. My classmates wondered what had happened, and so did I. I didn't want to ask my parents about it. 15 years later, I heard from Sarah on Facebook. There was no life-changing conversation, but we exchanged pleasantries. That's life sometimes. I've always had a close bond with one of my cousins, Alex, who is the same age as me. We've been great friends since childhood, always finding ourselves together, both in school, where we ended up in the same class throughout elementary school, and outside of it. When we were both 12 years old and in the 6th grade, I was hanging out with Alex on a Friday afternoon, towards the end of May. We were excited about the weekend ahead. We ended up at Alex's house since it was conveniently close to mine. At one point, my mom called to inform me that our grandfather was in the hospital. Although the situation wasn't life-threatening, he needed to stay overnight for observation. Both our parents and Alex's parents were planning to stay with our grandparents at the hospital, since my mom and her sister were the closest siblings. I was given permission to spend the night at Alex's house, with his older brother, Max, who was 15, taking charge while our parents were away. We were fine with this arrangement. I got along well with Max, and he wasn't the typical bossy older brother or cousin that some of my other friends complained about. We ordered pizza and enjoyed goofing around like typical boys our age. Around 9 p.m., there was a knock at the front door, and Alex went to answer it. Curious about who would visit at that hour, I watched from a distance. At the door were two older guys who claimed to be from the city and said they were investigating reports of low water pressure in the neighborhood. They asked if Alex's parents were home, and when Alex said they were unavailable at the moment, which was the response we were instructed to give to strangers when our parents weren't home, the guy started asking numerous questions about the water pressure in the house and requested permission to come inside and check. At that point, Max joined us and politely suggested that they move on to check other homes in the neighborhood since the water pressure was fine. Reluctantly, the guys left after Max began closing the door. After the door was shut, we exchanged shrugs and didn't think much of it afterward. We resumed our goofing around until we noticed it was time to go to bed. Alex and Max shared a bedroom, and we agreed that I would sleep there with them instead of crashing on the couch or elsewhere. This way, we could continue talking until we fell asleep. Max grabbed a sleeping bag from their camping supplies for me. When we entered their bedroom, they stripped down to their briefs. I remembered Alex mentioning in the past that they started sleeping in just their underwear. Since I hadn't planned on staying the night initially and didn't have any overnight gear with me, I felt a little embarrassed but decided to strip down to my briefs as well. I knew they wouldn't say anything or judge me, considering we were all guys. They climbed into their beds and I settled into the sleeping bag. We chatted about random things for a while until we eventually drifted off to sleep. Early the next morning, I woke up because I needed to use the bathroom. I quietly got out of the sleeping bag and went to relieve myself. On my way back to the bedroom, I heard noises coming from the family room, which was at the opposite end of the house from the bedrooms and the bathroom I used. Initially, assuming it was either Alex or Max, I didn't pay much attention. However, upon returning to the bedroom, I realized that both of them were still there. Trying not to panic, I woke them up and told them that I suspected someone was inside the house. They quietly followed me, and as soon as we entered the family room, we saw the two guys from the previous night, blatantly robbing the place. One of them approached us, brandishing a menacing knife. The three of us instinctively raced to the front door, somehow managing to unlock and open it, and we fled outside. As luck would have it, a police officer happened to be passing by at that exact moment. We quickly flagged him down and informed him about the intruders inside the house. The officer called for backup, and within minutes, several more officers arrived. They entered the house and, after a thorough search, apprehended the two criminals. The police deduced that the burglars had entered through a window in the laundry room, exploiting a broken latch. They likely targeted that house, realizing there were no adults present, and assuming that if we discovered them, we would be easier to handle than adults. Adding insult to injury, while we waited outside during the police search to apprehend the two criminals and ensure no one else was hiding inside, some neighbors emerged to investigate the commotion. Among them were kids from our school, including several classmates from the 6th grade. It was during that time we realized we hadn't had the opportunity to get dressed. Thus, just like in a stereotypical nightmare, we had to stand outside, fully exposed in our briefs, for what felt like an eternity before being allowed back inside. When we returned to school on Monday, Alex and I endured a fair share of snickering, stares, and teasing for the next few weeks until summer break began.